Frozen dinners sold under the Boston Market brand are being recalled. The new recall affects more than 173,000 pounds of Boston Market frozen pork dinners.
What if the frozen meals in your freezer are nothing more than clever marketing, wrapped in colorful packaging? Some promise luxury, but deliver disappointment, while others quietly offer restaurant-quality food without the hype. Why do certain brands keep fooling shoppers year after year? And which ones are actually worth your money? In this video, we're exposing the biggest freezer aisle failures, the tricks brands use to cut costs, and the meals that truly deserve a place in your kitchen, separating marketing from reality and showing you exactly what to avoid. The frozen threat. Avoid 1. Iceland Luxury Cottage Pie. Iceland has built an entire empire out of slapping the word luxury on things and hoping nobody looks too closely, and their luxury cottage pie is Exhibit 1. The mince has been processed into a brown, textureless gloop that could technically be anything, drowning under gravy granules and water. The mashed potato topping looks flawless in the photo on the box, those perfect little swirls, but out of your actual oven, it turns into a watery mess that refuses to brown. The sort of thing even the cat would walk past. Real cottage pie used leftover Sunday roast, actual vegetables, and meat you could point to and name. This is a factory approximation wearing a premium label, and the meat-to-gravy ratio alone should be classed as false advertising. Even the smell out of the oven gives it away before the fork ever arrives. Flat, steamy, and strangely metallic, nothing like the rich, roasted note a proper cottage pie fills a kitchen with. Avoid 2. Findus Crispy Pancakes. Findus Crispy Pancakes were everywhere in the 70s and 80s. The tea your mum made when she couldn't be bothered cooking properly. Nostalgia has a way of lying to you though, because these were never actually good. They were just familiar, and now they cost twice as much while pretending to be retro rather than admitting they're mediocre. The batter goes soggy instead of crisp, despite the name promising otherwise. And the filling is a mystery paste that might be chicken and mushroom or might be nothing at all, since every flavor somehow tastes identical. Even followed to the letter, the instructions produce something scalding on the outside and frozen solid in the middle. Some things genuinely belong in the past, and this is one of them. There are dozens of better frozen options now that simply didn't exist back in 1978. So buying these purely for old time's sake stopped making sense a long time ago. Avoid 3. Asda Smart Price Lasagna. Asda's Smart Price range exists for the week's money is properly tight, and nobody should be judged for reaching for it. But their lasagna is so spectacularly bad that a tin of beans on toast would be the better use of the same coins. The pasta sheets arrive like cardboard that's been boiled and then forgotten about entirely. The meat sauce is mostly tomato water, carrying the occasional suspicious brown fleck, and the cheese sauce on top is a chemical approximation of bechamel, as though someone dissolved plastic into milk and called it a day. Cheap has never had to mean inedible, yet somehow this collapses into a watery mess the second a fork goes anywhere near it. Not even bad enough to be memorable, just aggressively, soul-crushingly average. Your generation understood that cheap never had to mean inedible, and somehow British freezers have quietly normalized meals that wouldn't pass as food under any reasonable definition. Avoid 4. Rustler's Microwave Burgers. Rustler's Microwave Burgers exist to answer one question: how quickly can something become technically edible without anybody caring whether it's actually good? 90 seconds in the microwave produces a bun that manages to be both soggy and rubbery at once. A patty that tastes like compressed, vaguely meat-adjacent protein that never came anywhere near a cow, and a smell that lingers in your kitchen for hours afterward. This is fast food, with the food part quietly removed. People buy rustlers drunk, desperate, or usually both, because sober and thinking clearly, nobody looks at that box and calls it a good decision. The cheese doesn't melt so much as sweat into an orange puddle, and whatever passes for sauce tastes like ketchup described second-hand to someone who has never eaten actual food. There's convenient, and then there's whatever this is, a product that crossed the line from convenient into something closer to actually offensive. Avoid 5. Bird's Eye Economy. Fish fingers. Bird's Eye makes several tiers of fish fingers, and their economy version has almost nothing in common with the ones your mum bought decades ago. These are mostly batter with the faintest suggestion of fish somewhere inside, and whatever fish is present tastes like it's been frozen and refrozen until any connection to the sea has simply evaporated. The coating turns greasy rather than crisp, sitting there soaking up oil instead of doing its job, while the filling has that oddly compressed, flaky texture that bears no real resemblance to actual cod. The company has spent decades quietly cutting costs, and the economy range is exactly where those savings landed, leaving the good version of the recipe sitting one shelf up, at a price this box was clearly designed to undercut. Fish fingers should be simple, decent fish, decent coating, done properly, and these fail on every count while somehow no longer even being cheap. It's a brand quietly trading on decades of goodwill, built by a far better product, hoping nobody in the queue notices the difference between the name on the box and what's actually inside it. Look at those 5 failures side by side, and a pattern starts to show itself rather clearly. None of them are failing because they're cheap. Plenty of cheap food is genuinely lovely. They're failing because somebody along the way decided a customer would accept less real ingredient and more filler, more water, more reconstituted paste, standing in for the thing the packaging actually promises. That's not a budget problem. That's a trust problem. And it's exactly why so many people have quietly stopped believing anything printed on the front of a frozen food box. Avoid 6. Charlie Bigham's. Charlie Bigham's has built a genuinely impressive business convincing Middle Britain that frozen food can be aspirational, complete with a friendly face on every box and language borrowed straight from a restaurant menu. Strip away that branding though, and you're paying close to £10 for a meal that feeds 2 people only if neither of them is particularly hungry. It's perfectly pleasant food. Nobody's claiming otherwise. But it isn't £10 pleasant, and most of that price is clearly covering packaging and positioning rather than the actual ingredients in the tray. Anyone happy to cook could make the same dish from scratch for half the cost and better ingredients besides. Save the tenner for an actual restaurant, where at least someone else handles the washing up afterward. Fair play to the business for the success it's built. But a lot of what's being sold here is brand and packaging, rather than anything happening in the actual tray. Avoid 7. Aunt Bessie's roast potatoes. Aunt Bessie has convinced the entire country that frozen roast potatoes are an acceptable substitute for the real thing, and they simply are not. This is a betrayal of everything a proper Sunday roast is supposed to stand for. They emerge from the oven neither crispy nor fluffy, just vaguely industrial, tasting mostly of oil and quiet disappointment, with the faintest hint of potato if you concentrate hard enough. The edges refuse to crisp, no matter how long they're left in, or how high the temperature climbs. Roasting potatoes was never difficult in the first place. Peel them, parboil them, rough up the edges, drop them in hot fat, and wait. Aunt Bessie is betting that feels like too much effort and charging premium prices for a noticeably worse result. These roasties are expensive, unsatisfying, and manage to make a proper Sunday dinner taste like a motorway service station. And some shortcuts simply aren't worth the time they claim to save. Avoid 8. Dal pack pies. Dal pack pies turn up in corner shops and budget stores, usually in bulk packs that look like value right up until the first bite. Explains exactly why they were so cheap. The pastry is that strange industrial short crust that somehow manages to be hard and soggy simultaneously, never once achieving anything close to flaky. The filling barely registers, mostly gravy, with the occasional suggestion that meat may have been involved at some stage of production. These pies are cheap because they're built from the bare minimum of ingredients, processed until they only just qualify as food. Britain makes genuinely brilliant pies. Dalapak simply isn't one of the examples anyone should point to. The meat tastes of little beyond salt and a vague sense of meatiness. The gravy is essentially colored, thickened water, and the whole experience leaves you faintly depressed rather than fed. Avoid 9. Iceland's Frozen Greggs range. Iceland's stocking frozen Greggs products sounds clever on paper, right up until you remember that Greggs food is meant to be eaten hot, fresh, and roughly 4 minutes after it left the oven, not frozen for weeks and reheated at home into a pale imitation of the original. The sausage rolls come out dry and deflated, the steak bakes develop that unmistakable reheated pastry texture that never sits right, and the entire experience leaves you wishing you'd simply walked to an actual Greggs instead. You end up paying premium freezer prices for an inferior version of food that was already cheap and excellent when bought fresh. If the craving is real, walk to the shop. It's everywhere, it's inexpensive, and it's genuinely nice when it hasn't spent 3 weeks in a freezer. Anyone thinking they'd found a clever shortcut usually finds out with the first bite that the magic-making Greggs, actually Greggs, simply doesn't survive the freezer at all. Avoid 10. Tesco Value Chicken Kiev. Tesco Value Chicken Kiev sums up everything wrong with the bottom shelf of frozen food. It's technically chicken, and technically shaped like a Kiev, but calling it by that name stretches the definition close to breaking point. The chicken is that reconstituted, pressed substance that reads more like chicken-flavored protein paste than an actual breast. The garlic butter inside is mostly margarine with garlic flavoring added afterward, and the breadcrumb coating turns greasy rather than crisp, no matter what you try. Cut into it, and the butter runs out as a sad little pool of yellow oil that tastes of neither garlic nor butter. Spending 1 extra pound buys something that actually resembles chicken Kiev, rather than this depressing imitation of it. The whole thing costs barely anything, and honestly, that price alone should tell you everything you need to know about what went into making it. Price alone never explains any of this second batch either, and that's the uncomfortable part worth sitting with for a second. Charlie Bigham's is expensive and still falls short of its own price tag, while Dalepack is cheap and falls short of basic edibility. And somehow both mistakes come from the exact same place, a brand betting that branding alone can carry a product further than the ingredients inside it ever could. Sometimes that bet is packaging dressed up as premium. Sometimes it's a familiar name licensed onto something the original never would have allowed near its kitchen. Either way, the customer is the one who ends up paying for the gap between the promise and the plate. We're halfway through, and if you're still with us, you've survived the worst British freezers have to offer. The next 10 are the ones actually worth buying, the ones your mum would approve of and your grandkids will genuinely finish. The Freezer Heroes. Hero 1. M&S Gastropub Fish Pie. Marks & Spencer's Gastropub Fish Pie is exactly what a frozen dinner should aspire to be. Proper food, made properly, simply frozen for convenience rather than compromised for cost. There are real, identifiable chunks of salmon, cod, and haddock throughout, sitting in a genuinely creamy sauce built on real herbs and seasoning, topped with mashed potato made from actual potato rather than reconstituted powder. Serve this to guests, and nobody clocks that it came from a freezer, because it tastes like something from a proper gastropub kitchen rather than a production line. It costs more than the budget alternatives, but every extra penny goes toward ingredients you can actually see, name, and taste, which is precisely what convenience food should have been doing all along. The fish is properly sourced, the portions are generous rather than stingy, and the whole dish tastes like it came from someone who actually knows how to cook, rather than a factory chasing a price point. Hero 2, Waitrose Gastropub Chicken, Ham and Leek Pie. Waitrose's Gastropub Chicken, Ham and Leek Pie is traditional British pie done exactly right. Real chunks of chicken breast, thick slices of proper ham, and fresh leeks sit inside a creamy sauce, all wrapped in genuine butter puff pastry that rises beautifully and turns a deep golden brown in the oven. There's no mystery filling to squint at here. Everything inside is visible, identifiable, and clearly cooked the way a pub kitchen would do it if it actually cared about quality. The pastry alone sets it apart from cheaper competitors, flaking and crisping properly instead of collapsing into cardboard. And it's the single detail that separates a pie worth remembering from one you forget by the time the plate's cleared. Yes, it costs Waitrose money, but it delivers Waitrose quality in return, and that's a genuinely fair trade. The chicken stays tender, the ham carries real flavor, and the leeks give the whole thing that unmistakable traditional character that makes it feel like heritage cooking rather than something off a factory line. Hero 3, Aunt Bessie's Yorkshire Puddings. After dragging Aunt Bessie's roast potatoes earlier, credit belongs where it's due. Her Yorkshire puddings are genuinely excellent. They rise beautifully and taste remarkably close to homemade, with that perfect balance of crisp edges and a soft, fluffy middle. These come frozen raw rather than pre-cooked, meaning they emerge from your own oven fresh rather than simply reheated, and they hold up better than most people manage cooking from scratch, unless there's genuine Yorkshire heritage and a family recipe behind the effort. They rise properly, crisp up nicely, and never collapse the moment you glance at them. It's proof that even a brand capable of disappointing you in one aisle can be genuinely brilliant 2 shelves over. Better, honestly, than most people manage in their own kitchen without generations of practice behind them. Hero 4, Cook. Cook is a smaller frozen food company most people have never heard of, simply because it doesn't sit on big supermarket shelves. It shows up in farm shops and independent delis instead, and it deserves to be far better known. The beef bourguignon, fish pies, curries, and cottage pies are all genuinely excellent, built from proper ingredients by people who clearly know how to cook, rather than technicians following a spec sheet. It's expensive, there's no getting around that, but the prices match genuine restaurant quality results, and that's a fair exchange, rather than a markup for branding. The beef is tender, the sauces carry real depth, the vegetables look and taste like vegetables, and the entire experience feels homemade rather than manufactured. That's what happens when a company employs actual chefs instead of food technicians. The difference shows up in every spoonful, not just the headline ingredients. Hero 5, Young's Gastro Fish Fingers. Young's took the fish finger, arguably the definitive childhood tea, and gave it a proper, grown-up upgrade, and the result genuinely works. The Gastro Fish Fingers are built from chunky, identifiable pieces of real fish, wrapped in a proper panko coating, a world away from the pressed, reconstituted filling found in the economy versions further up this list. They're just as happy in a sandwich at lunchtime as they are served with something fancier for dinner when company's round. Grandkids will eat these happily because they're still recognizably fish fingers, but the adults at the table will enjoy them for entirely different reasons. They cost roughly double the economy competition, and every extra penny is obvious the moment you take a bite. This is what fish fingers would look like if a chef had invented them instead of a cost accountant trying to hit a margin target. Notice what every one of these 5 actually has in common, because it's rarely just the price tag. Each one is willing to let you see exactly what you're eating. Real fish you can identify, pastry that behaves like pastry, meat that still looks like meat once it's cooked. Nothing here is hiding behind a sauce, because the sauce is doing damage control. That transparency is worth almost as much as the ingredients themselves, because it means the photo on the box and the food in the tray are finally telling the same story. Hero 6 M&S Luxury Cottage Pie. Marks & Spencer's cottage pie earns the word luxury that Iceland's version borrowed without ever paying for it. This is proper cottage pie, built from identifiable chunks of beef, a rich gravy made with genuine stock and a splash of wine, real vegetables and mashed potato that turns fluffy and properly golden on top. It tastes like something made by someone who genuinely understands cooking rather than something assembled on a production line to hit a price point. The meat stays tender, the gravy carries actual depth of flavor, and the potato topping is generous rather than an afterthought. It costs more than the bargain bin alternatives, and every extra penny is immediately obvious the moment it comes out of the oven. This is the proof that Iceland's version was always missing, that a frozen cottage pie can genuinely earn the word luxury, rather than simply printing it on the box and hoping. Hero 7 Waitrose Perfectly Balanced. Waitrose's perfectly balanced range finally answers a question diet food has ignored for years. Why does eating sensibly have to taste like punishment? These are proper meals with genuinely controlled calories that still taste good because they're built from decent ingredients rather than simply stripping out fat and flavor and hoping nobody notices. The chicken tikka masala, beef lasagna, and fish pies in this range are good on their own merits, not just good for diet food. And the portions are generous enough that nobody's left hungry 20 minutes later. The curries carry real spice. The pasta dishes use proper cheese, and nothing tastes like it was reformulated by people who secretly resent food. This is healthy eating for people who still genuinely enjoy eating, which shouldn't be revolutionary, and yet somehow still is. You can eat sensibly without feeling punished for it, and this range is the clearest proof of that on any supermarket shelf right now. Hero 8 Pukka Pies. Pukka makes traditional British pies, steak and kidney, chicken and mushroom, mince and onion, and does every single one of them properly, with genuine short crust pastry and fillings that are easy to identify and satisfying to chew through. There's nothing fancy or gastropub about these. They're straightforward British pies made the way pies are supposed to be made, and they're genuinely excellent for it. The pastry turns golden, crisp, and properly buttery. The fillings are generous with real chunks of meat, rather than gravy padded out to look like more, and the overall effect tastes like something a grandmother made, rather than something that rolled off a conveyor belt. They're reasonably priced and available almost everywhere, from corner shops to major supermarkets. Proof that traditional British cooking survives the freezer perfectly intact when nobody cuts corners along the way. They're not trying to be gastropub or fancy about anything. They're just doing the basics properly, and that turns out to be more than enough. Hero 9 Morrison's Savour Sausages. This next one feels like a contradiction after everything said about budget ranges so far. But Morrison's Savour Sausages genuinely earn a place here despite the low price tag. And that combination is rare enough to deserve real credit. These are proper sausages with a decent meat content, real seasoning, and actual texture, a world away from the pink, unidentifiable filling found in most budget alternatives. They're not artisan bangers from a specialist butcher, but they're honest, dependable, everyday sausages that cost almost nothing and still do the job beautifully, whether that's a fry-up, a sandwich, or toad in the hole. Proof that cheap and genuinely decent aren't automatically opposites, provided a brand actually bothers to try. Nothing fancy is happening here, just honest sausages, fairly priced, doing exactly what they're supposed to do without any pretending involved. Hero 10. Bird's Eye Inspirations. Bird's Eye Inspirations shows what happens when a company that's been making frozen food since the 1930s decides it still has room to evolve. This restaurant-style range covers dishes like slow-cooked lamb, piri-piri chicken, and salmon with Asian-style vegetables, all frozen and ready within minutes. Built for people who've grown up, developed a taste for something more interesting, but still want the convenience frozen food offers. Every dish here is genuinely impressive. Proper meat and fish, sauces built on real spices and herbs, vegetables that go well beyond the usual peas and carrots. 90 years in the business clearly taught this company something. And Inspirations proves frozen food can be convenient without being boring, quick without being lazy, and affordable without ever tasting like it. That's the proof sitting right there in the freezer aisle. Put the whole second batch together, and the lesson repeats itself one more time, just from the opposite direction. Morrison's proves cheap can still mean honest. Cook proves expensive can still mean genuine, rather than just branded. Waitrose proves healthy doesn't have to mean miserable. And Bird's Eye proves a company old enough to have invented the category can still bother reinventing itself, rather than coasting on its own history. None of these 5 needed a gimmick to earn their spot. They just needed someone in a factory somewhere to care slightly more than the bare minimum required. And it turns out that's rarer and more noticeable than it really ought to be. So there it is, 10 frozen dinners that deserve to stay on the shelf, and 10 absolute heroes, proving British frozen food can genuinely be brilliant when a brand actually bothers. Price was never the real divide here. A 2-pound sausage beat a 10-pound tray, and a supermarket's cheapest pudding outclassed its own premium potatoes. The only thing separating winners from losers was honesty about what's actually inside the box. So next time you're standing in that aisle, remember this list before trusting the packaging. If this saved your freezer or your Sunday dinner, hit like, drop a comment telling us which one we got wrong, and subscribe for more.